Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing fine. So this is just one of the packet tracer examples that we have in our practice final exam. So I had a few people that reached me out saying that they were not able to complete this activity. So I'm just gonna go over this activity with you guys now because I think this is a really important activity because it just basically relates to pretty much a lot of the content that we learn throughout the semester. So I'm just going to show you guys how to get this activity done. So it says here in the instructions that we need to configure two interfaces on router 1. So basically interface 000 and interface 01 on R1. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing now. So because this is an introductory course, Networking Essentials, you are not actually required to dive deep into command line. So I'm just going to go to the router and you have two choices here. So you can go on an adventure and just configure the router interfaces using CLI. Or the second option that you have is just go to config tab and just basically change the IP configuration from here. So I'm going to be doing it here because everything I do here is actually going to translate to a few commands that the router will interpret. And these commands are the same commands that you would use if you would be doing this in CLI. So let's do it. I'm just going to configure the router interface S000 as instructed. So this interface is got these IP address here, 192.168.1. And as you guys can see here, there's a .2 near the interface. That means this IP address of this interface has to be 192.168.1.2. And as you guys know, if I just hit the tab key, it will autocomplete the default subnet mask. All right. So what I need to do next is I need to make sure that this interface is enabled. As we discussed already, the router interfaces, they're all disabled by default. In order to do this using the config tab, I just need to click the port status on, and that will translate to a no shutdown command on the router interface. And that's exactly what we want. As you can see here, the link from the router to the ISP cloud became green now. So it's not red anymore, it became green. Now we still have to deal with this interface here that is red, and to fix this we just basically need to enable these router interface as well and also assign it an IP address. Alright, let's do this. So I'm just going to navigate to the Gigabit Ethernet port 01 on the same router, and I'm going to set up the IPv4 address here accordingly. So it's 192.168.4. As you can see here, it belongs to this network. So 192.168.4. And as you can see, it's a .1 interface. So I'm just going to set it up as .1. Autocomplete the subnet mask by hitting the tab key again. Done. So what we're left with to do here is just basically turn the port status on. So I'm just going to tick this box. There you go. Now the interface is alive. As you can see here, the link is now green. Perfect. So what we do next is we have to configure the wireless router as well accordingly, because the main objective here is to make the laptop access the web page located here in this server that is connected to the ISP cloud. So in order to do this, I'm just basically going to configure the wireless router first. So I'm going to close the R1 configuration window, and I'm going to click into the wireless router configuration. Now what I need to do first is configure this router interface that is facing R1. And in order to do this, I just need to navigate to config and configure the internet port of this wireless router. So I'm going to click into the internet tab, and here, as you guys can see, we have a few options. Obtain the IP configuration using DHCP, static, and PPOE. Usually the router that you have at home, the multi-purpose device that we talked about throughout the semester, uses DHCP usually to obtain IP address from the ISP. Some ISPs, they will also offer this service at an extra cost. Some ISPs, they actually charge 10, 15, up to $20 for a static assigned public address. In our case here, we're just going to assign it statically. There is a hint here, so this address has to belong to this network. So the wireless router interface needs to be in the same network as the R1 interface that is connected to it. So in this case, we need to obtain an address that is 192.168.40, and we need to keep in mind that we're not going to be able to use .1 because .1 is already picked. So we're just going to grab the next one. So it's going to be 192.168.4.1. Subnet mask will autocomplete. One more time. We need to specify the default gateway, and the default gateway is just basically going to be R1 interface. So that's going to be 192.168.4.2. And the DNS server, just going to specify the DNS server here. It's the one that is given to us. So it's 198.51.100.5. And now I have just finished configuring the internet port of the wireless router. So what I need to do next is just basically set up all the wireless configuration in this wireless router so that all these devices here can connect to the wireless router and access the web server. In order to do that, I need to do it through the GUI. So I'm just going to click in the GUI tab of the wireless router configuration. And I'm going to set up the IP address to be on the 10 network. I'm going to configure the start address accordingly. So that is supposed to be 50. The maximum number of users is 50. So that the range will be from 50 to 99 as required. So the static DNS will be the one given, 198.51.100.5. I'm gonna save this. So what's actually interesting here is that Packet Tracer is giving an error if you do it this way, and I'm not sure why. I think that's an issue with the router configuration and the way that the exercise was set. So I'm just gonna go back to my config in the internet port. I'm gonna change it up to DHCP. Browse back again to the GUI, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna refresh the GUI. All right. So the internet setup will still be auto config. I'm gonna change the wireless config first. After that, I'm gonna go back and change the internet config. So this is gonna be 192.168.10 to reflect what's asked in here. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Once again, the starting IP address, oops, I need to save it first. Done. So the starting IP address will be 50. I'll have up to a maximum of 50 users. I'm going to save this. As you guys can see here, the range reflects exactly what I'm asked to do. The DNS will be 198.51.100.5. I'm going to save this. All right. Now I'm going to navigate to the wireless config of the router. And now I'm going to set up the wireless signals that these devices are going to use to connect to the wireless router. So the SSID is given. So it's 1912345 So another thing that is also given to me is the security settings. So after I set up the SSID, I'm just going to I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go to the wireless security settings. And that has to be WPA2 PSK using AES encryption. And the passphrase will be Cisco Labs. Oops, Cisco Labs. W2PSK AES Cisco Labs. I'm going to save this. And if I have done this correctly, all the devices will be able to connect to the wireless router. Done. So if you have reached to this part and you are not sure why you're still not able to connect to the web server using laptop PT1, that is because basically this link is broken. Because of this issue with the configuration conflict, you won't be able to go across this wireless router because of this. Now look at how interesting is this if I just go back to the config tab, and if I just go back to the internet, set up to static again, give an IP address within the same network 192.168.4.2, and remember this is .2 because .1 is already being used by R1. The subnet mask will be the same. The default gateway will be 192.168.4.1 because it's the door for this router to reach out to other networks. And the DNS server is the same, 198.51.100.5. So now look at this. If I close this now, this configuration dialog box, if I go to my laptop, desktop, web browser, and if I type it in, it's going to take a while for the first time. Hit go button. There you go. So your answer is your configuration is correct, and that's what you have to choose between the choices you're given in the final exam question. All right? Perfect. So I hope you guys have a great weekend of studies, and I hope to see you next week in class for our final knowledge assessment. Have a great weekend and see you next week.